Okay, good morning, grade 7 and 8. Welcome to our next lesson when it comes to working with Cartesian planes. Today we are going to be working specifically with reflections. So a couple of things that we need to remember, first and foremost, that even if we have 4 quadrants and I put a mark here, I have to remember that the x-coordinate comes first, followed by the y-coordinate, so that this would be, well, in this case, again, I always manage to pick the perfect squares, 2, comma, 2. And if I put one here, this has to be 3, comma, 2. I always deal with the x-axis first, which is left to right. Y-axis goes vertical. All right. So we also covered translation last week, where if I move a point to a different point, I have to say which one is first by saying A, and then my new point will be A little 1, or subscript 1 if we're using a technical term. Then I count, okay, I went 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right, 1, 2 to the upward position, and then I could say what my various coordinates are. That's translation. We've had some practice with that. I haven't had any questions on translation. Now we're going to talk about reflection. So I want you first and foremost to treat these axes like a mirror. So if I have something on the x-axis, let's say -2, 1. Cool. I'm going to treat this y-axis here as my line of reflection. That's what we're going to call it when we've created a line, and I'll even put it in a different color. Now this guy is my line of reflection, and I want to create a, pardon me, mirror on the other side. So it's a matter of counting. I'm going to take my coordinate, my dot, and I'm going to count how many spaces away it is from my line of reflection. So it is 2 spaces away from my line of reflection, which means my reflected dot should be 2 spaces away. And as you can see, that's a mirror for as much as we can make it a mirror. All right, as for fun, I'll just say, okay, this is point A1, this is my reflection, this is A, my reflected coordinates are 2, 1. And that'll largely be the same with a vertical line of reflection, that this was -2, cross that axis, now it's +2 if I'm using the y-axis as my line of reflection. However, very important to know, you can create a line of reflection anywhere. Well, another easy example, what if we use our x-axis as our line of reflection? So now I'm using that. If I create a coordinate here, okay, so even though we're looking at the y-axis now, I still put the x-axis first. It's 2 from the 0, which means it's 2, then to 4. Now I'm going to count. How far away is it from my line of reflection? 1, 2, 3, 4, which means my reflected point is 1, 2, 3, 4 away. And it should be a mirror. You have to count carefully. That's where we're going to get a lot of mistakes. And now my coordinate is still 2, -4. Well done. All right. And as I was saying, I will now make it even harder. Lines of reflection can go anywhere. If I make this my line of reflection, I've created a vertical line of reflection at the 3 on the x-axis. If I place a point and I say, here's my point, this point is not 1, 2 spaces away from the line of reflection. This point is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away, which means my reflection is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you're dealing with reflections on coordinate planes, you always have to ask yourself, where is the mirror? How far away am I from the mirror? And then, of course, on the other side, just like with real mirrors, when you look at one, you are the same distance away on the other side of the mirror, or at least your reflection is. Right? There may be, I'm just going to do a quick double check that you don't have any diagonal lines of reflection. Oh, it doesn't look like you do. Well, that's really nice. You don't have any diagonal lines of reflection, so we're not going to cover that right now, but you will also have to do things like shapes. So the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to do shapes. I'm going to create a different line of reflection. Whoop. And now I'm going to create a square. Well, that's a circle. Now, if I have to reflect this shape, I want to focus on each individual dot. It would also be helpful to label it. So these points are the only things I'm really worried about. Trying to do every single point along the line and make it connect the dots will be just too much of a waste of time. So if I have labeled these A, B, C, and D, I want to make A1. So A is 1, 2 away from the line of reflection, which means A1 is going to be here. This is not the point where you can go, oh, sweet, I'm just going to make a square. Okay, so it's 3 up, which means this, this, and this. Draw my square. Happy times. No, you have to keep reflecting each individual point. So let's do B1. B is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away from the line of reflection. B1 will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ignore that. Away from the line of reflection. And I'm going to label it B1. You're going to say, but Mr. Hopper, doesn't B go on top? No. In the reflection, B is furthest away from the line of reflection. Therefore, it's going to actually be on the bottom in our reflected image. D is 2 away. D1 is 2 away. Notice that none of these are changing to the right or to the left because we're only focusing on our mirror, and therefore C1 will be 5 away. C1. If I make some nice lines and connect the dots, I'll make it purple. I'll make it red. I'll make it blue. Boom, 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 boom. That is my reflected image. If this green line is my mirror, that is what my reflected square will look like. So looking at the questions in your booklet, it is a little bit tricky to see, but for the most part, they are very clear where the line of reflection is. Sometimes they mark it with a letter L, the fancy cursive writing letter L. Sometimes they ask you to write a line of reflection. Sometimes you're going to have to make one. Draw the mirror line, as they call it. So please keep your eye on that. I encourage you to use pencil crayon. I encourage you to use a thin but dark marker or Sharpie to create some of this stuff. And as I showed you here, this is how I like to do lines of reflection, this dotted line, because if I do a solid line, I might accidentally mistake it for the x-axis or the y-axis. So I use a dotted line or a line in a different color when I do these things on the board or with my own work. And we will talk about applications of using coordinate planes, as well as the grade 8 lesson for tessellations tomorrow. Thanks for watching.